Hey, thanks for finding During the Break podcast. Give us a share, and if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. It helps us grow the podcast. You can find us on Facebook at During the Break Podcast. You can listen to all of our conversations at duringthebreakpodcast.com. And a big thanks to our sponsors, Granite Garage Floors of Chattanooga, Alchemy Med Spa, Optimize You of Chattanooga, The Barn Nursery, RentMyEquipment.com, and the Vascular Institute of Chattanooga. I know each and every one of these folks personally. They do great business. If you do business with them, be sure to let them know you heard about them on During the Break podcast. Now, let's do a podcast. What's up, everybody? In this special edition, it's kind of a mashup. A lot of times I'll take when I'm a guest on other people's podcast, or maybe it's a guest, maybe it's a podcast that I co-host. Sometimes I'll mash those up and share them on two different podcasts. But this one is me actually getting permission from a friend of mine, Tracy Cotton, who has a group. She formed a group, and it's called a Build a Better Bucket List Challenge 2023. I think she's going to do one or two of these a year with a small group of folks that they hold each other accountable. They learn how to set some goals. They challenge each other. It's a really cool thing, and it's a process. But she ran into my podcast a few months back, actually in the middle of 2022, and she liked some of the stuff I was saying. She asked me to come on the podcast as a guest and cover some stuff that I've talked about on my short coaching podcast, the audios. So combining 3, 4, or 5 of those podcasts into one small presentation and talk with her and this small group. I thought you would enjoy it. It was a Facebook Live to her group only, so you'll hear us talking about some comments that pop up from time to time. And I just enjoyed being there. I got her permission to share it. Hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much for the invite, Tracy.
The During the Break podcast, actually, the funny thing is, I literally found the podcast through Facebook. I was scrolling through and saw somebody had reposted a really funny meme, and it was one of yours under the During the Break podcast page, and right. I was like, oh, that's really funny. It was something about, like stepping on Legos or something. I mean, it's something. It was great, and I was like, this is a local podcast. Well, that's great. And I literally went on that very day and subscribed on Apple Podcast, and then it took me months and months before I finally was like, one day I just was like, I think I'm just going to listen to this episode. And that was the episode. It was the episode I needed. So,
well, good. I'm glad you found it.
Well, I think that's one of the things that you figured out in podcasting is that you put it out there today, and you don't know when somebody's going to catch on that it's going to be the day that they needed to hear whatever you were talking about.
Yeah. And that might be a good place for me to just kind of start setting this whole thing up. It's, I move fast when I do this. I used to do this for years. I did these kind of talks in person. I missed that, but thanks to technology and COVID, everybody became video friendly. But yeah, I move kind of fast, and I'm combining in tonight's conversation basically 3 or 4 different podcasts into one. So it's gonna be kind of full of content, some general stuff, because everybody that watches this is a different place in life, a different place in business. And the podcast thing that I started doing was long form, all conversational, 30 minutes to an hour and a half. And then I started realizing, let's see, we got a comment. Thanks to COVID. Yeah.
Thanks to COVID.
I hate to say this, but I mean, it's like everything else in life. You got to find something that you pulled out of it that you can take away as a lesson learned. I ask that from business folks, and I have on my podcast all the time. What are the lessons you learned through the horrors that were and are COVID? Because there are things that people use now in business that they had to adapt, and they're using hopefully post COVID. And so that's an important thing. But yeah, I learned in podcasting, you make them shorter, 3 to 8 minute long segments for coaching. And it seems to have struck some chords out there. And I enjoy doing it. And anytime I do a talk like this, or I attend one, my goal is to either be reminded of something, to rethink how I think about something, or be motivated to go do something. So people may, at the end of this, think that guy's an idiot and doesn't know what he's talking about. But if you go figure it out on your own because you don't like anything I said, that's still a positive. That's the way I kind of look at it.
I think that's the best way to look about it too.
Yeah.
It's just because, I mean, not everything that you say is going to resonate. And I also think that there's probably going to be some things that you're going to say that people are going to say, well, I've heard that before, but we all need those reminders.
Well, 100%. I'm not going to say anything brand new. And one of the things that I've always said is I can hear the same thing 10 times, but on the 10th time, I just may be at a different place in life, or I may be hear it from somebody different, same message from somebody different, and it resonates. I just had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day about how our kids will listen to coaches or teachers, and they'll come home like they've heard it for the first time. You're like, I've been saying that for years,
Yeah. What
and
am I, chopped liver?
yeah, so anyway, that's kind of how I look at things. But I think you wanted me to one of the things you wanted me to talk about, and I've tried to put this together in a kind of a way that would make sense, is the beast in the basement. Is that a good place for us to start?
I think that's a fantastic place to start, Clint, because where we're at right now, and you and I have already talked about it a little bit, is just that after a month, almost a month long program, they're coming in on the last few days of this program, and they've done all the work to really go from having a big idea, like all these ideas of what they want to have on their bucket list, to really fine tuning it to the things that they know that they can actually get started right now on. But there's things they're going to be struggling with, and they know that some of these struggles are going to be coming up. They've already kind of previewed that. And how are they going to be able to make these things happen? A lot of it starts with them. And I know that this is going to address some of the things that they are going to be facing.
Well, and it's probably stuff we all face from time to time. Let me start with kind of defining what I look at as beast in the basement. First of all, everybody has real trauma that has happened to them. Some it's worse than others. I've been to therapy. I've had a coach, and real serious problems need professional help. I hope no one avoids that. The sooner you go, the sooner you can start the healing process. But what I'm referring to when I talk about my beast in the basement is basically the versions of ourselves that we create along the way that we don't even realize we're creating. I always use stories and analogies. So as I move through this, if you've got questions or something, feel free to interrupt me. But, it's almost like we got the suitcase, right? And things happen to us in life, and we just pick up whatever happens, drop it in our suitcase, and keep walking. We don't ever slow down really to evaluate the lesson I can learn. What do I need to leave behind? What should I take with me? We just dump the whole thing in the suitcase, and we just keep pulling it through life. And the older we get, or the more we put in that suitcase, the heavier it can become. And it can be things like losses, broken relationships, unmet expectations, words that were said to us years and years ago, abuses, failures, and even successes. We put all of these things in that suitcase, and it starts creating these versions of us, and it becomes a heavy thing to carry. So we kind of put it in the basement. We hide from it, right? That we don't want to deal with all of that. We're busy. You're going to hear that word come up a lot tonight, busy. We're so busy. Here's another great analogy. I've got kids that are all grown up now, but we used to watch this movie called Monsters, Inc. Have you ever seen Monsters, Inc.?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a Sully fan.
I love Monsters, Inc. This was, I think, Monsters, Inc. 2. There's this game where they've got to go through this obstacle course, and if you touch something, it makes whatever it touches poof up and hurt. And they've got to go through this obstacle course, and you can't touch the little things, or it makes you poof and it hurts to move. It's kind of that way through life. We encounter these things, they impact us, and we try to keep moving, but we don't ever slow down. We become this different person. And that's what I'm talking about, the beast in the basement. And in my world, what happens, at least, is the longer I avoid putting things in place to help me counter that beast voice, it gets more and more influence. So I build a life of comfort around that voice. And then the life I build reinforces what the beast is telling me. You're all of this or you're none of that. And then it's self-fulfilling prophecy. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to counteract that. But that's my definition of my beast in the basement. Through divorces, or through failed companies, or through words said, maybe I've acted poorly. It all contributes to that version of me that I'm not super proud of. And it can be a little, shakes my confidence. Does that make sense?
I think it makes total sense. And I think that it's knowing that a lot of these things that people are going to be actually doing are things that really are going to be a test of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And if their confidence is shaken still, is not on firm ground because of their past, it could definitely prevent them from stepping out into the future.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about how to build some confidence here in just a little bit. But one of the things that beast will do is it traps you in mindsets. And this is where we move into a couple of the other podcasts I think you liked. It traps us in different mindsets, but there's three that I want to talk about tonight that's just specific that I struggle with. One is the yeah, but mindset. And the yeah, but mindset to me is probably one when I start explaining it, everybody's going to go, oh, yeah, I can relate to that one. It's the yeah, but I'm too tired. Yeah, but I'm too busy. Yeah, but I'm not a morning person. I don't know where to start. Yeah, but I don't know the right people. Yeah, that's not for me. It's the yeah, buts. We want to do things. We want to start new things. We want to redefine things, all of this, but we get into the yeah, but maze. And what happens, it's like the mouse in the maze. And instead of there being ways out, it's just a bunch of closed doors. I mean, there's no way out of the maze. If I want to be a different person, or if I want to start new things, new adventures, discover new parts of me, but I'm always doing the yeah, but thing, I've trapped myself. And that's where frustration comes in. By the way, Tracy, I told you I was going to have my gold peanut instead of my pen. So
I was going to start chewing my pen on a little bit, but you did good.
Yeah, thank you. See, I've got it. I'm not doing, and now I'm going to do it just to make you mad. I want to start doing that. Tracy was telling me the other day, don't bring that pen up because it bothers me when you chew on it. I said, I don't usually. I have a brass peanut. My grandfather carried this when he was an engineer on the railroad for good luck, and he left it to me when he passed. And so I use it anytime I'm doing stuff important, and this stuff is important to me. Rachel, yeah, the morning problem holds me back. I admit, yeah, I think it holds everybody back, and some people are morning people, and some people are night people. And there's the lot of this is that fine line between reality and what we want to be. Oh, thank you very much. It's a comfort thing. It's my little blanket, like I'm in the peanuts, you know. But the yeah, but one is a bad one. Now, the other one, though, that I struggle with is I've tried that before. The mindset of I've tried that before. I ran into this a lot when I was in advertising. I was in radio advertising and management for about 11 years. If you combine it together, I owned a billboard company for 3 or 4 years. And whenever I would talk to somebody about advertising, I would say, hey, do you have an advertising budget? And they would go, nah, not really. You'd be amazed as how many people say, I don't really have an advertising budget. Well, you question that a little bit and you find out, well, they spend $1,000 over here, 500 on a baseball team. They support the little baseball team. They've got a website. They've got this, they've got that. And you add it together and they're spending like $5,000 a month. They just don't know where they're spending it. So I'll ask, well, why don't you do, and I'll use radio as the example. It can be anything. Why don't you use radio anymore? Oh, it just doesn't work for me. Okay. All right. Well, then you start asking questions about that and you find out that they never really used it correctly, right? There's 3 things you need for any good advertising campaign: your message, who you're talking to, and how often you say it. I don't care if it's digital or radio or billboards. Well, any one of those elements that's not right is going to affect the success of the campaign. Now, I'm going to tie this back to us here in just a minute, but it's not that radio didn't work. They tried it, air quote, their way, right? So what happens to us? I get great advice from my friend Tracy that says, Clint, you ought to try this intermittent fasting, or you ought to try to save $50 a month, Clint, instead of trying to save 1,000. You don't make enough to save 1,000. Or just take one class online. You don't have to get your degree in 6 months. Put a plan in place. Do something. And instead of taking your advice, I take just enough of it, and then I sprinkle in my air quote reality of that beast in the basement that reminds me of who I am, right? So I morph it and I edit it in such a way that I can just say, I can check the box. Yes, I've tried it. It didn't really work for me. But we know deep down that I've not really tried it. I didn't go all in on the table. I didn't push my chips into the table. I tried it Clint's way, and just enough so I can tell everybody why it didn't work. I'm almost scared to find out if I tried and it doesn't work. That's even more terrifying. Does that make sense?
Absolutely does.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is it gives us the excuse.
Oh,
And, and we're loaded with excuses.
oh, yeah. Well, and I was going to say this later, but I'll say it now. We all have what I call our Trojan horse. Whenever you start trying to do something really different in life, our beast will roll that Trojan horse right up to our door, just like the old Trojan horse in Troy, and we bring it in and it jumps out. It's our favorite excuse. It jumps out, right? We get inside our own brain. Of course, you're too old, Clint. Of course, you're too broke. Of course, you're too this. And you're like, yeah, I knew it, man. I knew it. Well, I'll just stay in my little comfort zone. And what's really weird about comfort zones, they're not very comfortable. Staying in your comfort zone is just as painful as change. It's just the pain we're used to. And again, that'll probably come up here in the next 15 or 20 minutes. But the third mindset, because I said there was three. The first one is yeah, but. Second one's I've tried that when I haven't. The third one is the dangers of success and failure. And that's called the I have arrived, right? So I talk to a lot of my sales rep clients and my coaching about this. Whenever you think you have arrived at success, like it's a destination, you figured it out, then you stop doing the things that made you successful. And so all of a sudden, you lose the momentum. The dangers of success are very real. That's also true in real life. As soon as I think I figured out marriage and I don't really have to work on my marriage anymore, why is my marriage not as good anymore? I stopped doing the things that made my spouse feel like they were important to me. Or maybe I stopped taking care of myself in a way as far as growth. Maybe I've ignored something. Anyway, the flip side of that, though, is I have arrived at failure. I am, again, you're going to hear this repeated several times because it's very important. I am whatever the voice in my head tells me I am. I am not a morning person. I am not an author. I can't write a book. I can't learn to play an instrument. I can't hike I can't go up that mountain. Why? Because that's not who I am. I have arrived. And the mindset of I have arrived is just as dangerous as any of them, because then if I've arrived, I become a rock in a moving river. Everything else is changing. And I'm not changing and especially if I am changing, I'm not changing with intentionality. We stop evolving. Does that make sense?
I think it totally makes sense. And it just shows that we're so afraid of change that we're willing to just sit, sit wherever. Like we're going to sit and our so-called success, like, oh, I've gotten here, I'm going to sit here, or I've failed and I'm just going to sit here.
Yeah.
I mean, like literally, like why we are not willing to continue in motion. It's baffling at times.
Well, and to what you're saying, and we're getting ready to move into how do I counter this? How do I counter this beast in the basement? I use a heavy bag every morning. That's my quiet time. My theory is God doesn't know between your tears and your sweat. I mean, only God knows the difference. No one else does. He knows whether you're crying or sweating, and both are okay with him. But life to me, and I come in, I struggle with this, by the way, all the time, but I try to remind myself it's almost like going on a really big hike, getting to the mountain view, and then not looking at the mountain view. I mean, life, this is the only journey we get here. To me, I want to spend as much time trying to figure out the beauty of what I can be, what I can do, who I can help, what my body's capable of, what my mind's capable of. I don't want to miss the view of who I could be because I don't get to take this hike again. And that to me is pretty inspirational when you get up and realize today I got a chance to see the view again. And I don't know how many of those I've got left, so that's before I move on to your point. I agree. I think it can be very tempting just to stay where we're at. Okay. Are we ready for me to move into the how to counteract this stuff? Are you ready for that?
I think so. I
Or do you
noticed
have questions or
I
comments?
was looking to see if anybody had put anything up that, specifically, that we needed to stop and talk about. But I think that you even kind of like you threw in some of the things that people are going to what we're going to put up against ourselves, what we're identifying ourselves as being too old, night person, day person, and really being stuck in that comfort zone. So I think everybody's following. I think everybody's tracking with you.
Well, I'll say this to that point. We are what we tell ourselves. We're going to talk a minute about the power of the words we use. But I heard I wish I could remember what podcast it was on. I'd love to give credit to somebody for this, and I'll look it up and maybe send you the link. But I heard someone say one time, our mind is like a warehouse or like a room full of employees. And when we get up every morning or whenever we're going through something, it listens to us. And if we get up and say, I am unlucky, I'm not a morning person, I can't do that, it gets up. The manager stands up in front of all the employees and goes, okay, everybody, Clint got up today. He's not in a good mood. He's unlucky. Listen, he's not looking forward to a good day. He's expecting some bad stuff. Let's all get to work. Let's make sure we're ready for that. And it starts feeding into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the opposite's true too. The opposite, if you get up and say, hey, it's a good day, I'm blessed, I'm looking for a couple things to be thankful for, blah, it gets up and looks at the employees and goes, okay, everybody, Clint's pretty happy. It looks like he's got some stuff ahead of him today, but he's going to work through it. And by golly, we're going to be there to help him. Yeah. And I'm like, ever since when you think about it that way, I want to tell all my little employees up here to get to it. You know, I don't care if I'm not, by golly, I'm a morning person now. And they're like, I think he's pretty cranky in the morning myself. Well, put the coffee in it, big boy, and let's go for it. Let's do it. That's the other thing as we move in. This is a good transition for us, I think. It's once you decide that you're tired of being trapped in the mindsets, right? You're tired of the beast having all of the room and all of the space in the room with the voice. You're tired of that. I'm not arrived. I'm not done yet. There's views I haven't seen. Just know that as soon as you do that, the beast hates it and he is going to fight back. Life is going to make it inconvenient. All of a sudden, when you've not had one plan, let me give you a great example. You tell yourself you want to get up early and you want to start working out, right? Guarantee you're going to get sick. I promise. You're going to get sick. A car's going to break down. Or for the first time ever in the history of your world, you got 3 appointments this week at 7:30. You don't know why. It just happens. The beast will do everything to whisper into your ear. See, I told you so. I told you. Of course your knees hurt when you try to work out. You're too old, Clint. See, and I get mad. I'm like, well, of course my knees are going to hurt whether I'm working out or not. So by golly, we're going to work out. That's just how we're going to do it. But anyway, so just know that when you start telling the beast, when you open the door, it's not going to like the fact that you're going to decide to fight back. It's not going to like that you want to lose the weight or you want to climb the mountain or you want to write the book. And it's amazing what we as human beings can get used to living with. I don't know if you've ever had broken bones or little things that were off, but your body will compensate. I played a lot of sports and I've had times when my back's been out of whack or my shoulder's been out of whack. And I keep living with it because I don't want to go to the doctor because I'm an idiot. And so what happens is, after about 2 or 3 weeks, you start all of a sudden learning to live with it. You compensate. I can still function, so I'm okay. And then all of a sudden you get it fixed and you're like, oh my gosh. It's like getting a good night's sleep when you hadn't slept in 4 days. You're like, oh, this is what it feels like to be healthy and well rested. That is what happens when we don't deal with these beasts, these versions of ourselves that we've just accepted. We start living in pain and we compensate in other areas. Clint compensates with donuts and trying to alienate myself and don't hang out with people. I'm not kidding you. That's one of my, I know when I'm going down a wrong road, I track my habits and I can tell when there's something wrong with Clint. There's something I'm not addressing. Can you relate to that? Or does that make sense at all?
I can totally relate.
Okay,
and
good.
And I think
for a minute, I was feeling weird. I'm glad you can.
No, and I think that's the thing is because we can get so comfortable in our discomfort, we really that, and I mean, I think that everybody's got, that genuinely want to, to do better.
Yeah.
It's just that we just can't help but somehow find a way to put a limit on that. Is if there is a limit. And I mean, like I've talked to several I've been doing coaching calls with each one of the folks that are in this program with us. And as I've been going through it, I mean, we've talked about the fact that we know that, getting into space, like we can all say, yeah, that'd be great. Put that on my bucket list. But, are we really going to make the cut to be an astronaut? At this point in time, there's some realities that we have to face. I'm 5'2" with my hair. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be a center on a basketball team. That's just
Right.
not, I'll be lucky if I'm fast enough to be a point guard. I think that we have to realize that there's some limitations, but most of the limitations that we put on ourselves are absolutely self-imposed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that I think that if we're living with these self-imposed limits, and we're okay with it, and we keep on being okay with it, that's where it really, it becomes a struggle, because we haven't called BS on ourselves like we should.
No, we're going to talk about that in a minute with windows and mirrors. But to your point,
Okay.
there's a big space between I can't be an NBA basketball center and I'm not going to do, you know what I'm saying? And not
True.
doing anything. And then,
Yes.
and a lot of times, some of the stuff we use as crutches, being authentic. I want to just be true to myself. That's great. But if I'm using true to myself and authenticity and reality are ways to limit testing myself at all, then it becomes part of the beast in the basement. It just becomes something that he offers us. Hey, look at this. You can never be a sinner. Well, then I won't try anything. And we can base it off, I got to be realistic. Yeah, but most of us, it's not that we run into realistic difficulties. It's we don't challenge ourselves enough to realize that what we think is realistic and not realistic is maybe a mirage. We don't know because we never try a lot of times.
Exactly.
So how do we fight back? One of the ways that I have found fighting back, one of the tools, is redefining my terms. So, and by the way, real quick, Tracy, it's your show. Am I moving too fast or too slow? Do I need to pick it up a little bit? Are we okay?
Oh, we're doing fine.
Okay.
I mean, if anything, you're probably going faster than,
Okay.
I mean, like everybody's probably over there just taking notes. It's great.
I want to make sure I'm respectful of what you're expecting. So redefining our terms and our terms, our definitions guide our thoughts and our goals. So when I start coaching calls, I'll ask people, I've got a couple clients. I go, I want to be a better business owner this year. Okay. And I'll go, what does that mean? And they go, well, I mean, I want to be, I want to be in more control of my money. What does that mean? It sounds silly to keep asking the same question, but you start drilling down, and it's amazing how often we have not defined our terms. For example, if I'm in a relationship with somebody and we're talking about saving money. If I ask Tracy right now, hey, do you like to save money? You're going to go, yes, right? Yes. Of course. But if I have $1,000 in the bank and I consider that a success, that's fine. But you may go, I can't live without 20,000. I got to have 20,000 in my savings account. So we're using the same words, but we're not defining our terms. Well, we do that with ourselves as well, our inner voice. I'm saying things like, I want to be healthier. I want to be a better business owner. I want to be more adventurous. I want to grow. What does that mean? I don't know. Well, if we don't know, then you can't put a plan in place. I challenge people to sit down and define their terms. When you say, I want to be healthier, what does that mean? When I want to be more successful, what does that mean? I want to be a better Christian. What does that mean? A better friend. What does that even mean? What does a good day feel like? If I were to ask somebody, what is your life? What do you want from your life? Well, I want to be happy and successful and meaningful. Okay, that's great. So how do you measure that? And if it's all feelings, have you written those feelings down? Have you planned out what a great day would look like? It's funny. We spend a lot of time planning vacations or planning presentations, planning game plans. If you're a coach, very rarely do we make a life plan. Very rarely do we sit down and envision what a good life for us would look like. And it's because of that, we get frustrated because then we don't have anything to measure it against. Have you ever, if you ever built a house or known anybody that's built a house, this is a great example, I think. They'll take you out to the dirt and they'll tell you where the porch is going to be. They'll walk you in through the front door. Now they go, now this is going to be the living room here. Now through this door over here, I'm going to have an archway and that's going to be my kitchen. There's going to be a window here so we can see out in the backyard. And you see that, you'll be able to see the mountains. Now the bedroom, they'll walk you through the house. The house isn't built yet. They've not started work on it. Yeah. Because they built it before they start the work. In our world, we're trying to build a life we've not defined. We've not put blueprints in place. So when I ask somebody, what does your life look like? You should be able to walk me through it just like you're walking through a house. It doesn't mean it can't change. It doesn't mean it's forever. It doesn't mean, but it means we have a something to start, so we know how to build the house, if that makes sense at all.
I think that makes perfect sense. And really what everybody's been trying to really, I think, do is finally put some legs on what a bucket list even looks like for them.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, I mean, we gave each other permission from the very beginning that our bucket list wouldn't have to be somebody else's. And, if somebody didn't have to put down skydiving, they could put down read the Bible every day.
Yeah.
It was whatever they wanted. And, and I, some suggestions. I said, don't put down, lose 20 pounds. That's not a bucket list item. But if you need to lose 20 pounds in order to be able to climb to the top of Mount LeConte, that may be your step to get to that part of your bucket list. But by defining what it actually looks like, and really in a way that they feel comfortable with, to be able to say, okay, this is what my bucket list looks like, and recognizing how capable they are of actually stepping into doing those things that they've been wanting to do. But defining it is the first step. I mean, like, you literally, if you've not, what does it look like to be more adventurous? What does it look like to, to go on more vacations each year? Is that one vacation a year? Is that 3 vacations a year? I mean, you have to define it. And I think that this is the first step that everybody needs to be definitely thinking about before they get started.
If I asked you, if you say, Clint, I want to be happier, and I say, what does that mean? If you can't answer it, then you'll never know when you get there. That's when the beast comes in and reminds you're as happy as you need to be. Vague definitions and terms lead to vague want tos and wishes. I wish I could. I really want to. And then all of a sudden, as soon as it gets hard, there's nothing there there's not a blueprint to remind us of what we're trying to build. And so we just go the way of the next want to and the wish to. And then we're reminded of what we are and what we're not. And we start building that same life back. We reinforce it. The other thing we can do, other than redefining our terms, is learn to track things. We track calories, right? We track our money, but we don't track our habits, and we don't track our mindsets. And a lot of times we don't track our time. And real quick, if there's ever down the road a guy that watches this, they hate the word journal. I hate to break it to you, buddy. That's journaling. When you keep how much weight you lift in the gym, that's journaling. When you keep up with your fantasy football stuff, that's journaling. When you keep up with that's all journaling, by the way. We may hate it, but we'll just call it tracking so it can appeal to everybody. But writing the stuff down, if you can track it, you can change it. If you can track it, you can adjust it. You can edit it. You can prevent bad trends. Do you know of any journals you recommend? No, I have a friend of mine. I actually keep, and I don't think it's around me right now. I actually keep my own journal that I kind of put together. I think it's out in the other room.
Do you use a bullet journal, or do you use just a blank? Are you like lines?
Yeah, I'm the guy that can eat the same meal 3 times a day and not get bored. I am low maintenance. So I like a journal that's got the date, the things I need to do, and my reminders of the big picture stuff, the big rocks, the things that are my vitals. So there are journals out there, and I'm happy to send you a few links of ones that some of my clients use that they like. But yeah, there are journals out there that may benefit different people. But if you can't track it, you can't change it. I can't identify a trend or a habit. And that's what happens to especially business owners, but it happens to us in life too, Tracy. We go 1 week, then we go 2 weeks, then we go a month, and we look up 6 months later, 5 years later, and we go, wait a minute, how did I wanted to write a book. I wanted to start that business. Why didn't I do that? What happened?
And one of the things that I had suggested, but it reminds me of something that you've talked about before. I had suggested to everybody that I've talked to so far is that each month that they literally be looking at this list again, that they look at the very beginning of the month and they look at their month and they go, okay, if I haven't already scheduled something for this month, what am I going to schedule for this month? What's on the list that I can actually accomplish this month? How can I fit it in? But I think that you've got even a better suggestion when you talk about that tracking. You suggest weekly. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm going to get to that in a second, but let me I'll just go ahead and jump right in. No, let's a great segue. If you're tracking things, your KPIs and LPIs, everybody's heard of key performance indicators. I've made up a term. I don't know if anybody else has ever used it, but I call them life performance indicators. So all key performance indicators are in the business world are metrics, 5 or 6 metrics that you can look at every week, just that you know if this is a healthy metric, right? Did I make enough phone calls? Did I have enough sales? Did I do enough presentations? All of these, there's hundreds you can choose from. But if these metrics are looking good, then I know my business is probably on the right track. It's like taking your vital signs when you go to the doctor. LPIs are the same thing. If I want to read the Bible 3 days a week, did I do that? Did I go walk? Did I get in my 10,000 steps every day? Did I have one cheat day? Did I spend time with my kid? Whatever your metrics are there too, right? But if you're tracking things, now this is where it gets tricky. If I track it and I never sit down to look at it, it does me zero good. Does me no good. I can't do anything with information I'm not actually absorbing and looking over. So the reason I like doing it weekly, if possible, in your business and in your personal life, is because that's how you can avoid getting in bad habits, going down bad roads, going, you know what? I've not slept good this week. And I'm looking at it. Well, heck, I didn't go to bed till 12:30, 4 nights last week. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe I can prevent that just doing it 1 week instead of doing it 2 months. And one bad habit always leads to the next bad habit. It just does. There's momentum in the bad habits. That's part of it. And just a side note, one of the things that I wanted to say to you real quick, people that have joined your group, your movement, that is one of the key things. Surrounding yourself by people who are on their own journey may not be your journey, but the struggle of figuring out your specific journey. And if you're holding hands along with that, with a group of people or some accountability, there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of echo chambers are real things. And if you're surrounding yourself with people that are having that same good vibe, that is a tremendous thing. I think it's probably one of the best things you can do. Anything else you want to add before I say my next thing?
No.
Because I'm about to really kick it up. Here we go. So when I say spending time with your KPIs and LPIs, this is something when I say my coaching folks that I try to make sure they spend at least 1 hour a week looking on their business, but we'll talk about personal stuff too. If you're real busy next week and you have on your calendar, Tracy, and I'm asking it rhetorically because I already know the answers. I've done this talk right here. It's about a 40-minute talk, probably 30 times in front of, if you add it up, a lot of people. And very rarely do I get pushback. Who's the first person you're going to cancel an appointment with next week if things get busy?
Myself.
100% of the time. 100% of the time, I'm going to cancel an appointment with myself. I'm going to move it. I'm going to 9 o'clock. I'm going to use an example. At 9 o'clock on Mondays, I'm going to review my business. Things get business. An employee calls. They got a problem. A client calls. There's a fire. A kid gets sick. Somebody forgot something. The dog threw up. The dog ate my homework. Asteroids hit the sky. Aliens invade the planet. Whatever happens, I am going to cancel that. And I'll say this. I'll do it after lunch. After lunch turns into Thursday. Thursday turns into the weekend. Weekend turns into somebody gets the flu. And this week turns into next week. Something happens and I kick the can again. All we are telling ourselves when that happens is I am not very important. If you want to talk away of developing the imposter syndrome, start subconsciously telling yourself you don't deserve the respect to hold an appointment with yourself. Because if someone else is important enough for me to schedule my time, to speed through red lights when I'm running late, to tell somebody, no, I can't be there. I've got an appointment at 3 o'clock with a client. I've got to go see my kid play ball. I've been through all that. All that's important and critical. You need to do it. But if you can at least put yourself on the same level of, I've got to review my life. I've got to review my business. I've got to review my relationship with God. Whatever's on your bucket list, whatever's on your I want to fix list, you're telling yourself you do not deserve the same respect as you're giving others. That will erode your self-confidence. That will erode your self-respect. And that starts turning into giving more power to that beast in the basement. Of course you don't deserve. Tracy deserves the respect because you want to be polite and you're nice, but Clint, you don't. Because you're Clint, man. You're with you all the time. Yeah, but I'm watching Netflix. That doesn't count. I have no intentional time working on myself. If I want to be the best husband or the best friend or the best father or the best whatever, I need to be the best human being. I can't be the best human being I'm meant to be if I don't spend time with myself. And the best way to get the imposter syndrome is kick the can and tell yourself you don't deserve the time. That's the fastest way to become an imposter. Now,
I don't know about anybody else, but that just hits me like right here, because I know that I know I have I canceled on myself last week. I think that all of us do it,
we do it.
and then we wonder why we feel the way that we do sometimes. Like, like, why do I feel like this? Well, because we've not given ourselves the same time and the same respect that we're giving to everything else on our list. And taking care of ourselves becomes farther and farther down the list as well, because it goes right along with it. I mean, the things that
Absolutely.
so.
Well, think about this. Think how it feeds itself. If I miss this week and next week's appointments with Clint, well, then what's the real big of me tracking? Really, technically speaking, I'm so busy. I'll have to start back when Monday. I used to do a seminar called Mondays Never Come, because
Mhm.
Mondays never come, and it's really weird how that works in our brains, right? But I'm always going to start the next best moment where there's no best moments. And
Mm-mm.
so if I stop tracking because I don't have the time to review it, then I'm left to the beast in the basement's voice. That's the only voice I have. There's the pools of my kids, there's the pools of my business and the marketplace and politics, and I need to do the bake sale at church, and my dog needs to go to the vet. Oh, and by the way, whispering in my ear is my version of myself that I don't want to face on a regular basis, because I have arrived at some place in one of those mindsets, and it's just going to remind me constantly that the only good I have is what I can do for others, not what I can do for myself. And the difference is, it doesn't have to be either or. It's not a binary choice.
Exactly.
That's just it. I don't have to live a life of selfishness or a life of self-sacrifice 100%. God wants us to be happy and contribute to people. Doesn't mean we're always not going to, doesn't mean we're not going to have pain. Doesn't mean we're always going to be in a happy place. But I do believe that contentment, even inside hard times and struggles, is something we should try to be achieving. I think I should be content in the moment as much as possible, if that makes sense at all. I may be getting a little deeper in the weeds on that one. But so redefining our terms, tracking, keeping appointments with ourselves. Now, how does that work? How does that help us? And this is the last point that you wanted me to address, I think. It helps us by learning to track, learning to redefine our time, learning to keep those appointments with ourselves, and having those KPIs and LPIs. Now we get to start asking questions, right? As you start spending time with yourself, I'm in that hour, I get to ask questions. I'm checking my metrics. Now, is this serving me? Is this working? It cleans off our windows. It cleans off our mirrors. And so the way we look at life, at least in my world, is through windows and mirrors. And windows is how we see the world, right? Everything out there. Mirrors are how we see ourselves. And it gets really cluttered. It gets really dirty. Over time, because we just start accepting the voices that are anything but ours, right? It's that the voice of the beast in the basement. Everything gets distorted. The outline that used to be clear and crisp becomes vague. I see the world through dingy films. I look in the mirror and I'm like, do I have spots on my head? Why am I so ashy gray? And then you clean your mirror with some good questions. You're like, oh, I don't have spots. I'm fine. I look great. I'm okay. I got a good look at that. I'm still Irish. I've got that good glow. We're doing great. And what I mean by that is the questions are what keeps it clean. Is this serving me? Why didn't I do the things I wanted to last week? What are the trends I see that I can fix? And here's the biggest one. Is it true?
Mm.
And when I say is it true, I mean asking, is what I see in the world true? Do I always feel like a victim? Is that true? When I use words like always and never, and this always happens to me, that never goes my way, those big sweeping that just justifies all of those mindsets. As soon as I use the word always and never, that leaves room for nothing else, then I'm only left with my excuses. And so as soon as I start asking real questions like, okay, is it possible they just had a bad day and that wasn't reflecting on me? Is it possible that I'm just buying into my own excuses. I really wasn't too busy this week. I just made different decisions. I'm not proud of those decisions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start tomorrow and I'm going to make a better decision. And I'm going to go ahead and do something tomorrow that's going to build my self-confidence. But all this feeds. If I don't have that moment, that hour, that time together every week where I can track those things, I don't have the questions. I can't keep my windows and mirrors clean. I will always see the world distorted, and I will always look in the mirror and see a version of me that's not real. And then I'll buy my own excuses. I'll believe I'm a failure, or I won't build in the reality. And everything just becomes kind of real, but not really. Not very fulfilling. Does that make sense at all?
I think it does.
I hope so. I hope it
so.
makes sense. Is there any comments that we need to address before I move into my final thing?
I was looking here to see. I know that Rachel had put in, there's a great 12-step principle. The minute you know you need to and want to stop right at that moment. It's the same with starting, because stopping and starting are right next to each other. And I thought that was kind of interesting, just because I do think that that's one of it's a beautiful thing. And literally one of the things that I had suggested to everybody when they start talking about the things that they fear, because some of the things they're going to be doing, like zip lining or skydiving or hang gliding, are things that we're going to have quite a bit of fear about. And to get past that fear is, I like that Mel Robbins principle, where she says it's you do a 5-second countdown, and then you just do it. I mean, like literally you count down 5 seconds and then you just do it. I mean, instead of hitting the snooze button, instead of doing the thing to prevent it from happening, instead you just got to start. So like that idea that the stop and start are right there together. If you can stop what you're doing wrong, like going down the wrong path, which I think is what Rachel's alluding to, where you are bad self-talk, or you are definitely, complaining again about that same thing that you can fix, and you start doing the next thing instead of starting next week, instead of starting tomorrow. Well, tomorrow at the very least. I mean, sometimes it is the end of the day, and you literally are figuring something else at the end of the day. But I know that you recently did a podcast about New Year's. New Year's is any day.
We're New Year's Eve right now.
It's New Year's Eve. Woo-hoo!
That's right. Absolutely.
Tomorrow, let's, what's it going to look like tomorrow? It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to start. And that's it right there. So.
Well, and man, we're right on. Listen to this. The last thing I'm going to bring up is ties in perfect. The last thing I want to say, the number one thing that will help us the most is action. It's the number one thing.
It's so motivating.
When we love getting busy, planning, training, self-helping, and we should. I love all that. Putting it on paper, using our calendars, using accountability groups. I love that. But action is hard. So when we put that in place, I'm going to be real careful how I say this, because this is something I struggle with. I spend a lot of time sometimes planning, because I want the perfect plan, and I've got my notebooks, and I'm going to do this Monday at 9:00. I'm going to do this Thursday. And I'm so busy planning that I look up and I'm like, I've packed so much change in my world. I get overwhelmed, and I'm like, I miss one thing. And I'm like, well, I guess I just try to do too much, bit off more than I could chew, instead of just putting a simple plan, being detailed with it, but then just have the mindset of just doing the next right thing, just one small step. Maybe it's a giant step, but maybe 12 small steps equals one giant step. And sometimes we forget that action, not perfection, is the key.
Action, not perfection.
Action, not perfection. But perfection, the enemy of better is best. I'm not saying you shouldn't aim for best. I'm not saying if you can ever reach perfection, go for it. I am all for it. But if you say I'm going to be frustrated and stop every time that the steps are too small, then you're always going to stop. Your excuses, the calling of your comfort zone will always be louder than the drive of your motivation. It'll always happen, because best is the enemy of better. And right now, tomorrow, when I wake up, I just want to do better. I just want to do better.
1%.
Yeah. That's all I want. It's just a little bit better tomorrow. And if tomorrow I fail, then the next day I want to do a little bit better. But all this ties together when you say, I want to do a little bit better, but you have to have that plan. If I want to go from here to there, I have to know, first of all, I have to know where I'm at. Then I have to figure out why I want to start the journey. Yep. Then I have to slow down every now and then and stop and make sure I'm on the right path. I say this all the time. You can dig a ditch all day long, but if no one ever stops and lifts their head up to say, is the ditch going in the right direction? Is it straight? Is it deep enough? Are we hit? Then you might just dig the ditch and you don't know where it's going to end up. That's why they do chalk lines.
That's true. Yeah. It's totally true.
Yeah. So my theory on this is let's just go be better.
I do. I like that. And Candace says, thank yesterday, love today, create tomorrow. I love that. I love that.
I love that. Yeah.
Has anybody got anything else for Clint? I was looking to see if anybody else posted anything else. Y'all have been very engaged tonight. I really appreciate that. That actually finally showed up in my feed so that I could be looking at it too. And I figured out who was who, even if it didn't tell me who was who. I know who you are. Because a couple of them, steps small or large, but both are moving forward. I like that, me.
Well, and two, again, you've already brought it up about reality, and I know we're running up on your clock here, but steps backward, bad days are gonna happen.
Yes.
It is, inconsistencies are part of it. It's I did a podcast on this a long time ago. Give me 30 seconds and I'll wrap my part of it up. I promise. They did a biosphere 2 about 20 or 30 years ago. They built an ecosystem inside this big dome. It was self-sustaining, animals, plants. I don't know if you remember that, but they did it. Well, what they found is the trees grew great, but when they got to a certain height, they started falling over. The reason it started falling over is there's no wind, because wind creates stronger root systems. And sometimes in life, we forget that we're going to have wind. Wind is there to help build deeper roots. You're going to have hard times and failures and unmet expectations. That's why you have your plan in place, so you then can get back on track.
And that's one of the things that we've talked about just this week is, that's why I had everybody do 30 items, not just the only 5. I wanted them to do 30 and then pick 5, because they're going to need other ones to, there's going to be ones that just aren't going to work. I mean, like literally, for those of us, I've got myself, Bonnie, who's on this list, and a couple other people that we know. We're going to go hang gliding up on top of Lookout, and we're trying to pick when, and we know that there's a good chance that whatever we pick is going to be a day when the wind is not going to be proper. And Lord knows I'm not trying to test, like I don't want to get blown right back against the cliff. Right. So I'm not trying to not go, but I also recognize that I can plan all I want, and that may not be the day that I actually get to go. So does it need to move with me? Does that need to move forward to another day?
Right.
I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But there are times when you may realize that you maybe lose interest in a bucket list item because you truly lose interest in it. Mm-hmm. It loses its meaning after a while, because when you finally start thinking about it, you're like, well, why did I really want to do that anyway? Maybe that's not something I really want to do. But you've got options. You're not just set, and you are checking in on yourself so that you aren't going to end up too far off the path. But that's it. That's pretty much what I think that everybody, I think, really, I think they're really going to benefit from the idea of utilizing now, going in and redefining their terms, really looking and making sure that they are clear, very clear on what their items look like. If they say that they want to go do something, they want to go to Europe. Well, what part of Europe is, when and where are they going to go? How are they going to do it? What does that look like? What does it look like? Actually defining their terms. Some of them have lots of other, like the things that people have on their lists are life-changing. And some people are literally going to change their lives and could this next year. And I just want to see them make it, but it's going to take making sure that they're checking in regularly, that weekly check-in, or they won't be able to actually get where they're going. Thanks so much for you being here too, Clint.
Bye,
Have
everybody.
a good one. Bye.